Okay, can you see some slides here?
Yep, we can see those there. Good.
Super. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Katie. So yeah, I'm Andrew Palmer. I'm a third year PhD at University of Liverpool, funded by the Pain Relief Foundation. So like sort of on the highest level, my project is about what influences patients' experience of a pain management program. So let me just time this, just to make sure I'm not going over too far. There we go, correct. So my primary supervisor, like Katie said, was Chris Brown. He's part of the Pain Research Institute too. And my three other supervisors are Katie, who's been a huge help through all three studies. So a lot of thanks to her. And then Laura Bonnet in Health Data Science, who helps with the statistics, and Jenny Day, who helps with the more qualitative stuff. Who's actually just moved to London School of Tropical Medicine. Okay, so just like sort of general aims of the whole project. So I've used a mixture of quantitative and qualitative methods. So quantitative to identify predictors of improved outcomes from pain management programs, and then qualitative to find more like nuanced stuff which can be missing in the quantitative methods. So all of this hopefully will support well, hopefully support service development for yourselves, and then also possibly some like segmentation work to like more for the qualitative side. Yeah, so these are the three studies. So I've got systematic review. So there's already a lot of studies trying to identify prognostic factors or predictors of outcomes from a pain management program. So I'm just trying to synthesize some of these studies. I'll talk more about that later. Also developing a clinical prediction model using that pain management registry that Katie was talking about from the Walton Centre. And the third study is, well, it's not completely qualitative, it's a mixed method study called using a design called Q methodology. And so the question there is, what are patients and staff's understandings of what influences patients' experience of a PMP? And so this is the study which some of you would have helped. Okay, for the systematic review first. So if you look at the core outcome domains for chronic pain, there's three domains which have already been synthesized. So identifying predictors of outcomes in physical functioning, quality of life, and pain levels. This has already been done. And so the last core outcome domain, which there was enough literature synthesized, was emotional functioning. So that's what we concentrated on. Yeah, so lots of search results, and we ended up with 36 studies to include. And because there's already a lot of heterogeneity just between the programs which were studied, but there was also a lot of heterogeneity in like the analysis used in the 36 different studies. Like for example, some would just be based upon p-values, like unstandardized beta coefficients, and then some use odds ratios. And if they all used like odds ratios, for example, we could make a meta-analysis out of it, which would be more handy, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. And so, as expected, really, there was a low certainty of evidence. So this was similar to the other systematic reviews. It's just like a mixture of mixed results or risk of bias in the studies, basically. So this meant that we couldn't identify any clear, consistent prognostic factors, but we identified 4 potential prognostic factors or predictors of improved outcome or emotional functioning, which merit further investigation. So these were high baseline anxiety, internal health locus control, part-time employment, and hope. And so this was another reason why there was low certainty of evidence. It's because most of the studies that we were synthesizing were what we call phase 1 investigations. So if you look at the first bullet point here, hopefully using these potential prognostic factors, new studies can actually focus their hypotheses on these specific prognostic factors rather than just exploring like a wide range of prognostic factors. So that'll lead to stronger evidence, and hopefully we can identify some of these as consistent prognostic factors in the future. And then the second bullet point is just talking about the problems with reporting and the need for a standardized analysis, for example, if everyone used odds ratios. So those are the main findings out of the systematic review. And so that's all completed now. And then for the prediction model, so we developed a clinical prediction model using your data from the pain management registry. And there's a load of data on there, which is fantastic for us to use. So we had pre and post data for 2,300 patients who completed the program. And we also had data for over 1,000, which completed the 6-month follow-up. We had data from too. And so I haven't run the model for the follow-up, but we will do that too. So yeah, basically the general aim of this prediction model is to assess how well outcomes can be predicted from the data that you already collect at one center. So I've said it may allow you to for like a support service development, but you can just obviously you're a clinician, so you can use this however you want. But yeah, more about the actual methods. So we're using linear regression analyses to model the associations, and so we're basically taking the predictors, all the predictors that you've got, like the baseline measures that you've got on the prediction model, and modeling their association to specific outcomes. And then we need to, I haven't run the internal validation yet, I'm still working on a code for that, but that will be using bootstrapping for that. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with the registry, but there's loads of information on there. And so we've considered 26 different predictor variables from your baseline data on the registry, from a range of those categories, like also gender as well. And we've got the primary outcome that we've chose is change in pain self-efficacy. So that's pain self-efficacy measured post-program minus pre-program pain self-efficacy. And so we decided to use this as the primary outcome based upon just literature and based upon like conversations with clinicians such as yourselves. And I'm going to run a secondary outcomes, secondary model as well, with a different outcome, which would be change in pain catastrophizing, which will obviously be an inverse. So we'll be looking at any decrease in pain catastrophizing as an improvement. Okay, and then so we've got some initial results. So like I said, I haven't done the internal validation yet, so some of the results are going to be corrected for optimism, if any of you know about modeling. So I can't give you the full prediction model that we've got yet, but I can tell you which are the most stable individual predictors, which is quite interesting. So the two, after like months of looking at this data, the two which like are consistently stable predictors are the first two here. So that's lower baseline acceptance of chronic pain and higher baseline perceived physical ability. So these seem to lead to more improvement over the course of the program in perceived self-efficacy. I did actually last night run the standardized coefficients for these two, and I haven't entered it yet because I need to sort of triple check that they're right. But they seem okay. And so for the acceptance, chronic pain acceptance, I had quite a large effect of it was 0.5 for the standardized beta coefficients. So that seems like actually by far the strongest predictor from the information I've got so far. Whereas the perceived, well, all the others were below 0.1. So like the perceived physical disability, the standardized coefficient was 0.05, which is a big difference from 0.5. So basically, acceptance seems like it has a large effect and it's stable. It's got a good p-value, whereas the others seem to have small effects. But perceived physical disability, which is like measured through the Rowland-Morris questionnaire, it is a very stable predictor. So that is, it comes up in every model I run, basically. So interesting findings. The third one, which at first I thought seemed contradictory to the second finding. So it's higher baseline scores in sit-stand test actually came out as one of the most stable predictors. It came out significant. Again, a small effect, but I thought it was interesting. And then also, I also compared anyone who's been on any kind of preparation program before the PMP to everyone who hadn't been on any type of preparation program. Because I know you do. I think it's all psychology, OT, physio. I think you do like sort of separate preparation programs for whoever you feel needs it. So I found that those who didn't go through any preparation seem to have more improvement. I've got like initial ideas for interpreting these results, but I just wanted to sort of ask if anyone has any sort of initial thoughts themselves before I sort of talk, because you probably have a better idea than I do, really. If anyone wants to shout out now, I'm happy to hear if anyone's got any initial thoughts. Otherwise, I'll just go on and talk about mine.
I don't know if people who are identified as needing that prep work maybe have more complex needs. I don't know if that's something to do with it.
Yeah, like that's one of my sort of initial thoughts. So yeah, I thought of a possible selection bias. So it might just be more complex cases, and so it could be an indication that preparation is just a marker for difficulty rather than it actually makes things worse. I don't know if this is. I haven't had time to speak to Katie about this, so I don't know if they are even delayed in their treatment. But just another thought I had, possibly if anyone's got any uh, comments at the end, like that they had a delayed treatment effect. Like you couldn't. Is it like strike while the iron's hot? Like you couldn't do that sort of thing. So yeah. Also, if anyone else has got any other thoughts, feel free. Otherwise, I'll just run on. Yeah, I'll run on. So yeah, so I think the biggest paradox was the sort of physical function. So again, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about this, whether you agree or certainly if you disagree, it'd be really interesting to hear. So just our initial, I spoke to Chris yesterday, and our initial thoughts were possibly a high perceived disability and some kind of physical capacity could describe the fear avoidant patient, which is like physically capable but limited by beliefs or fear. So we're wondering if there could be something in that. And generally, it seems as though there's like ceiling and floor effect in play as well. So meaning that if you've already got chronic pain acceptance, like high baseline scores, then maybe that just means that you've got less room for improvement. So it just means it might just mean that those who are low on acceptance have just got more room for improvement, and those who have got that high perceived physical disability have just got more room for improvement too. So it'd be interesting to hear if you think there's anything in the sort of fear avoidance patterns at the end. Because if you agree that's the case, then it could be interesting to use these as screening to identify who's going to really benefit from the program. Some interesting findings to in the categorical variables. So I don't really know why this would be, or it wasn't really a strong finding either. It's only like a 0.035 p-value. But it seems as if I think it's your OASIS programs, but like all of your programs for older adults, it seems patients seem to improve like slightly more on those ones, like out of all of the types of programs. And then the second one here needs to be taken with well, actually more than a pinch of salt, like a whole lump of salt, because it's like very small sample size for but with through Katie and the assistant psychologists, we managed to get a lot of data on marital status, which is fantastic, and it's really interesting findings. But it's just because it's a small sample size, they're not very robust. So they basically showed that single individuals show much less improvement over the course of the program in self-efficacy than those who are married or have a partner. It's like quite a fair difference, to be fair. Divorce and widow just fell in the middle of the two, and then it seems to fit in quite well with a lot of conversations I've had with yourselves, and also fits in well with the third study I've done as well. But yeah, just it's a very small sample size, so it's hard to draw any like sort of robust conclusions from it. So just looking at social support, practical factors, even someone to notice and celebrate improvements. I know a few people mentioned this in my third study, and then psychological factors as well. But yeah, need to emphasize the small sample size. Then the third study, so this was the mixed methods. So I'll run through the methods first, and then once I show you the output, it's probably easier to understand what we get from this study. But yeah, so it starts off. It's two stages. It starts off with interviews, and then there's like a sorting task. So the interviews are done, and they're quite broad interviews with patients who have been on the program, who have finished, staff such as yourselves, and also one GP I included for the interview. So I wanted to include GPs just for sort of that external viewpoint. They still do interact with patients like before and after the program. And the GPs that had, the one GP in this stage and the two in the second stage, they all had an interest in pain, so they're quite knowledgeable about pain. They're very involved actually in pain initiatives. So yeah, after the first stage was done, the 12 interviews, I transcribed the interviews and extracted all sort of relevant statements. So again, what we were looking for was what influences patients' experience of pain management programs. So I went through all of these statements with the supervisors, and we whittled them down to 55 statements, which were mostly just the statements which were said the most time. Like if more than one participant was saying the same statement, it's likely that they were included in the final Q set. It's called the 55 statements. But also just those which were just more relevant to our scope. And then once you have this Q set, this 55 statements, we then recruited completely new set of participants just to avoid self-selection bias. 8 staff, 2 GPs, and 20 former patients. And so their task in the second stage is to rank or sort these 55 statements into a grid similar to that which is on your bottom of your screen. So there'll be, well, there's more rows just because I had more statements, but it does run the same. So -5 would be the statements which you most strongly disagree with, and +5 would be the statements which you most strongly agree with. And so it's called a forced choice distribution. So it means that you have to really focus on which statements you disagree with the most and which you agree with the most. So it sort of concentrates those more extreme viewpoints. And so I collected these for all 30 participants, and they're all statements are coded. So I can literally just put them into this software here called PQ Methods, which is developed specifically for this type of study. And then the software is automatically using principal component analysis, evaluates whether potential factors. So these factors basically represent different groups of people with different viewpoints and how they view what influences a patient's experience in the pain management program. And it'll tell you just how much variance each factor accounts for. So it gave me 4 factors. And so if you can, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this is the amount of variance that each factor explains. And then these are the amount of participants out of the 30 which loaded to a certain factor. So factor 1 was representative of more participants than any others. And then, for example, factor 4, only 3 of the 30 participants actually loads this factor. So it's less people on average will be represented by this group, if that makes sense. And then 6 participants were just unique from any of these groups, so they didn't really fit to a particular factor. And so this is where my sort of personal interpretation has to come into it. So I've been through, like, analysed these factors myself, and so far I've come up with, it seems to be the factor 1 that represents people with a focus on mindset. Factor 2, they seem to have a focus on support over content of the program. Factor 3, this is a group of people who seem to focus on physio and also just information based. Whereas 4 was interesting. They seem to focus on the structure of the P&P, possibly for a more tailored and individualized approach. I'll go into more detail on these now. Yes, this is the mindset factor. So actually, it's probably you probably could get a better feel for it here. So these are the statements which distinguished particular factors. And so if you look at the right-hand side, you've got F1, which is like factor 1, and then it compares the importance of these statements to that group to the other groups. So if you look at the first statement, for example, +5, if you remember the grids, so +5 means that for this group, factor 1, this was like the joint most important statements that they agreed with the most. And so they said participants need to realize that it's not a cure for pain. And the other groups were quite neutral about this statement. And again, P&P works best for people with an open mind. They quite strongly agreed with this, whereas other groups were more neutral. And then also, like, sort of inversely, they were quite neutral about some statements which were strongly agreed with for other groups. So, for example, no particular type of person benefits most from the PMP. Everyone takes something different from it. So they agreed less with this. Maybe because they think that if you have a certain mindset, then you can benefit more. But this is just my interpretation. It'll be better explained when I write it down. And then also, they actually disagreed that support from others in the group was very beneficial. Again, maybe because they're focused on mindset. Whereas most groups actually thought this was beneficial, support from others in the group. They also mention as well that the more effort you put in, the more you get out. So yeah, I sort of see in this group as like a mindset driven. Now, if we look at F2, if you go down the F2 column to the green cell, this is the most distinguishing statement for that group, and they really put a big emphasis on family and friends session. So they also, sorry, this is F2 now again. So they also thought support from others, other patients was important, and support after the program was very important. They're just generally less enthusiastic about content, even things like pacing and stretching, which everyone else agreed with, which was important. They didn't really agree was important. So yeah, I've categorized it so far as support over content, but if you've got any thoughts on any of these, I'm very interested to hear your thoughts. Factor 3, the most distinguishing statement, if you go down F3 column to the green, is that moving is the best thing you can do. And then this sort of fits. This is actually very clear factor, actually. So they thought moving, pacing tasks, so like taking breaks, stretching, learning about physiology, all very important. Gym sessions aren't demotivating. It didn't strongly think physio is much better, but they thought physio was the most important part. We also had an interesting statement, which is about, so it was, the follow-up should be based upon patients' needs rather than data. And they were the only group which were happy for the follow-up just to be focused on data. And then also sort of information-based was, they thought that gathering information about medications was very important too. And factor 4, this was an interesting one. Again, this is the group which explained the least variance, so the least amount of people were in this group. They seem to be complaining about problems in the program, really, rather than focusing on content. So they're just saying that structure and the sessions should be different, maybe more tailored, more individualized. But also had much less emphasis on acceptance, and like the more effort you put in, the more you'll get out. So I don't know. We had a brief discussion yesterday. We were thinking about like pain stages of change and like readiness for change. I don't know. Maybe these patients like more resistant to this stage or something like that. But yeah, I think you'd be a much better judge of that than me. And then, yeah, so these are just like other notable statements, like most popular. It's probably easier to see in this slide. So the top one is probably the biggest finding because it relates perfectly to our main finding of the prediction model too, and that's the key word in this statement is learning. So learning how to accept the pain is an important part of the pain management program. Because we also had another, because this was the most popular statement across the whole QSOR. So yeah, we also had another statement, which was if you've already accepted the pain before the PMP starts, then you'll benefit more, and that scored much less. So it seems that having that room for improvement in acceptance, this is what I'm getting from these two studies anyway, This is what the data showing for me, is that having that room for improvement for acceptance and learning acceptance whilst on the program seems to be quite key. And then if you look at like the next few statements, like the sort of positive consensus statements seem to be to do with like relationship between staff and patients, or maybe even between patients and patients, like making the patients feel like they're not alone, making sure they feel heard. Also, if you look at the bottom statement on this table, so this is like they're saying it's not important for participants to tell staff what they're going through and how they're feeling, and everyone universally disagreed with this. So it's a lot about that communication between staff and patients. This is sort of like universally seen as important. And then the other two, which were quite strongly disagreed with, were pacing tasks. So it's those breaks in tasks, again, make no difference. So they're saying pacing is very important, apart from that group which went for support over the content. And then also, I don't think you'll be surprised to hear this, but there's a statement that said there's no need for ongoing support after you've completed the program, and yeah, everyone disagrees with this. Okay, and so yeah, just a general summary. So we've got some potential predictors from systematic review and prediction model, and then through the Q method study, we've identified potential themes to represent viewpoints of different groups. So just some ideas for future research. So after the systematic review, there's lots of studies which look at process variables. So it'd be interesting to synthesize these. So if you're looking at predictors, we're looking at baseline variables, but if we're looking at process variables, we could be looking at, for example, if improvement in chronic pain acceptance over the course of the program mediates self-efficacy improvement. So yeah, that could be interesting to synthesize. And then for the prediction model, it'll be interesting to do the same thing, but just in a different location. So that's an externally validating model. And then for the Q sort, yeah, we could do some segmentation work, or well, whatever. I think it's just interesting findings from the mixed method study. So yeah, if you've got any thoughts or comments or questions about any of that, then please let me know. I'm really interested to hear. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andrew. That was brilliant, really interesting. I just cannot believe the amount of work that's gone into that over 3 years, and it's really lovely to see how it's all coming together. It's triggered lots of thoughts and questions for me, even though I supervise the project, but I will keep quiet and open the floor to everybody else. Should we turn our light on as well? Yeah. So is there anyone wants to ask Andrew any questions?
Can I ask a comment? Yeah, I was just going to say the ones who need a lot more prep, I definitely think they've got poor prognosis because they usually got multiple health problems. They might be bedbound, housebound, extremely fearful of trying anything movement wise. And if they need three-way prep with all the disciplines, there would be an outside chance of improving these people. So that would make sense to me. And when you were saying about the ones that don't do as well, with the literature research I did, a prognosis factor of developing chronic pain from acute are females living alone. So that fits with that.
Thank you.
I was thinking what you were saying there, Sharon, with the prep ones as well. Sometimes that prep's about their overall level of engagement, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, we might be
with the peer approach.
Yeah.
It's not just sort of how physically deconditioned they might be, but how engaged they are with the peer process, peer approach.
That's good to know. Thank you.
I've got a thought less than a question. Andrew. Sorry, Carrie, I realised you just put your hand up. I rudely just jumped in. But when you first said it, am I right in saying that basically lower levels of pain acceptance correlated with more improvement? Is that
baseline?
Yes.
Baseline lower levels of acceptance.
Yeah. It's just more of a thought. I don't know, like, if this makes sense. I was fascinated to think, like, have you or has anyone ever looked at correlations between? Is there a correlation between lower baseline scores and therefore more improvement? I know you've only got two specific outcome measures there, haven't you? But like, almost if you did it within each measure, like, is there a statistical probability that, like, if you scored particularly low on any given outcome, that you're more likely to improve on that outcome more relative to others? I'm not sure if I'm making sense with that. I was thinking more about comparing it within each outcome measure, just because there's more scope to improve.
100%. Yeah, that's what I mentioned briefly about ceiling and floor effects. So that's what that sort of talks about, really. It's like it's basically exactly like you say. It could literally be that they have just got more room for improvement. So if someone's, or like taking that exact example, if someone's already got like high acceptance of chronic pain before they start the program, just means they've got less room for improvement themselves. So the pain self-efficacy, if it is a mediating factor, then the pain self-efficacy might already be at a high level. So they've got less room to improve self-efficacy.
It'd be interesting to see if that varied across variables, like whether some variables where that was more likely to happen and somewhere that didn't seem to, if that makes sense.
Yeah. After finishing the models, I'm trying to concentrate on finishing those first. I'm trying to concentrate on finishing the models first, but there's loads of like interesting, like sort of post hoc analysis I can do, and I can look at all different, see if any of these interesting thoughts, correlating variables, these type of things. I can check these out. But yeah, it's completely the case. It could just be that they've got more room for improvement. Yeah.
Debbie, can I just jump in, just because it's sort of on the back of that, because it sort of said lower perceived level of disability. Let me get it right. But then you say something around higher sit to stands. So actually being more able at the same. I was trying to just make sense of that.
So they've got, in out the prediction model. So it comes out that if they've got higher baseline perceived physical disability, so they don't think that they're physically able, but they've got like this adequate level of physical function, they seem to be the ones who make the most improvement.
Yeah, because I just noticed it sort of said on the next point, it sort of said higher sit to stands. Is that right?
Yeah. So they've got higher perceived disability, and they've got higher scores on the sit to stand.
Okay. So I think.
So it seems
subjectively more disabled than objectively, because we usually could bring up a case come saying, oh, they can't do this, can't do that, but actually when we ask them to do it, they can. It's just their self-confidence that they can't do it, and we can change that with treatment.
Okay.
And it might be different for different outcomes, but we are looking at perceived self-efficacy as the outcome, which it makes sense. Like if you've got someone who's able but doesn't think they're able, then maybe
that's what I was just thinking about, those ceiling and floor effects, isn't it? Because actually physically they might not make that much changes, but the self-efficacy does. Yeah. Exactly. Sorry, Kerry.
Thanks. That's great.
Was all good, Alison. Thank you, Andrew. That was really interesting, really, and I think there's sounds like there's lots more to come as well. So that will be fascinating to see what comes out. But just one of the thoughts, I had many, but one of the thoughts I just thought at the beginning, like when you were introducing the methods and the ratings and how that was done, I just wondered, and you probably not going to be reporting on this, but just in terms of your experience of doing the study, was there any themes that you picked out or any interesting differences between how patients rated all the factors and statements versus how staff rated what they felt was most important or less important? Did you pick up any kind of variation between patients and staff that you interviewed?
So like actually thanks for participating. So like we took those like demographic information at the end. So we have actually got that information. So the idea is I don't look at that yet, because in case it like sort of biases my interpretation of the factors. But like later on, I'll go back to these factors and I'll check how much of each factor was made up of staff, made up of patients, different types of staff. So I can do that analysis after. So when I finally have a report, I can send it out to you, and it'll have that information. Yeah, I'm
Because
really
it might
looking forward to
guide,
that.
isn't it, Andrew? Like potentially where you're putting your efforts and what you're prioritizing, and are you, is that balance correct depending on what you think versus what someone else is rating? But yeah, interesting. Thank you.
If you got any other questions, feel free.
Any other questions from anyone, or
Something popped up on the chat from Selena.
Yeah, Selena. Oh, and we'll just go to Selena's bit, Christine. I'll come to you. So what's she saying? Yeah. Mechanisms of change. Yeah, do you see that?
I can't see the chat. Maybe it's just gone to like the host or something like that.
Oh, it probably has. So she says, in reference to acceptance and perceived disability, while not surprised, potentially highlights the main mechanisms of change.
Yeah, it's I haven't been able to do like a comparison to the literature yet, but like that was one of our initial thoughts as well. Yeah, it's again, like when I do the reports, hopefully I will have had a lot of time to compare it to the other literature, like for example stages of change, readiness change. So yeah, I'm really interested in how it matches up to that.
Christian?
Yeah, just again another thought that popped into my mind, almost two questions. One is whether you think, based on what you've seen, it'd be helpful for us to track anything else on our database, given that you've been so immersed in it. And secondly, because I was just thinking, obviously as a clinician, one of the things we constantly see so strongly in our groups is just the complexity of group dynamics and group work. And I just wondered then, maybe we already tracked this, it'd be fascinating if you could somehow, for each patient that finished a PMP, to have a code that represented the group they were in, because that would enable you to then look at correlations comparing the level of change that seems to happen across groups. Does that make sense? Because I've always think that the group is such a powerful thing, and regardless of people's subjective perceptions, to see whether individual groups that people are involved in, is the level of change just random, or actually are there massive group dynamic factors which might predict or mean that there are certain groups that wildly benefit more compared to others? So there's always two things in there, that thought, and the more general one, is there anything else that'd be helpful for us to track, as it were, our database?
Do you mean like the groups as in like in my final study, like the different factors, or are you talking about different?
So what I mean literally is, like, imagine a patient attends the group between this date and this date, and there's 8 other people in our group, literally, that we managed to code that they were in that group. Because then what you'd be able to do over time, you'd generate massive data for which groups people are in, and you'd be able to see again whether there are correlations between the actual group people were in and the degree of change.
Well, I tend, in my interviews with patients, I got a real sense of it either went well for the group, well, not universally, but like say on average, it seems to go better for other groups, some groups than others. Like if there's a couple of people who were quite negative, for example, it seems to have quite an effect on the rest of the group. Whereas like if everyone's quite positive and just wanted to get on with it, then I'm sure you all know this.
That's exactly what I was thinking. But there are factors that almost like subtly perceives people's perception of the benefits that are group specific. It'd just be fascinating if you could gather that kind of data in the longer term.
Yeah, and it's like these groupings that I've got from the final study too. I don't know if that's interesting to find out, like which type of which sort of like viewpoint they come from, whether they're sort of like mindset focused or focused towards physio, for example, these sort of things. We can definitely find ways to like questionnaires or use different ways of sort of stratifying them based on these groups, if that's helpful too. But yeah, like when I come to my like general discussion at the end, when I've got all the data, I can actually look for. It's one of the things we've actually thought about already is just sort of if there's other things we can measure, which have popped up like sort of more consistently than others, which we might be able to advise like either creating some kind of measure for this. Say if it was like hope, for example, creating some measure for hope, or like using something which is already there, and like maybe you could add it to the registry, for example. So yeah, we are looking into that in more detail for sure later. So thanks. Yeah, Kerry.
So I don't want to take up anyone's time, so I can fall down on the list here. But I like your idea, Christian. I was just thinking, oh my God, you're looking at like another 3-year PhD thing to try and measure those dynamics of like group dynamic things, and whether that's positive, negative, the domination of that, and then like themes around group cohesiveness or group identity, and how much that swings you would almost need someone sitting in your groups watching and marking all these kinds of dynamics play out. It would be fascinating. Anyway, I've digressed. My only thought, Andrew, well, I like not my only thought, but one of my thoughts, whilst you were speaking, is I wonder what interests me, because with the kind of take home that it looks like pain acceptance and perceived disability seem to be like key major themes that have come out from all of the different factors and the different people you've interviewed and done the study with. It'd be interesting to me really to figure out or how to know what people were meaning by that, and what did they mean, because like the term pain acceptance is massive, and so what does that mean? And it's got so many parts to it. And is it just people see that as, you know, the open, non-judgmental stance towards, you know, how you think and you feel and towards your pain itself? Is it about making room for experiences rather than avoidance? Is it about the kind of psychological flexibility, and people have made those mindset shifts, and that's what they mean by acceptance? So it was just a thought that I thought would be quite interesting, is how to detain, if that's the main theme coming out, the importance of pain acceptance and that shift and the change. It's interesting that it's such a big term that encompasses so many cognitive and behavioral processes. So what was it that was the key factor within pain acceptance? What was it that shifted the most? Is possibly an interesting one, because that means so much. You know, almost like what was the main spice that made it so important, or that made it the biggest shift?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to say at the moment, but that's a nice bit of digging for me to do, for sure. So these, like for example, in the prediction model, it just came from like it's just strictly quantitative. So it's from the CPAC. It's like the chronic pain acceptance questionnaire. So yeah, I probably need to. I can look at those statements in more detail, what's actually on the questionnaire. So that'll give me a better idea. But yeah, in the mixed method study, I'm just using the word acceptance. So yeah, it'd be interesting to do like a deeper dive, because like you say, it is a broad term, isn't it? Encompasses.
We do have the individual items within CPAC, and I don't know whether different items map onto those different elements that Kerry was talking about, and whether. Sorry, I feel like we're giving you loads more work to do, Andrew.
No, if you've got 3-year postdocs for me to do.
I was going to say, there's part 2, project number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think maybe that's a good idea for us to record and keep hold of. But is looking at the within items, because I presume they do map onto those key elements of the acceptance process. I'm not sure, to be honest, I don't know a lot about it, but whether particular items do show, as Kerry says, a particular aspect of acceptance that does contribute to a better outcome.
Interesting.
I think they do a little bit, don't they, Katie? Because if I remember, I've not scored a CPAC in a wee while. That shows my laziness. But I think they map it into, is it two areas? I think it's something, I think they spread your scores, or you can into activity engagement, and I think they call it pain willingness and activity engagement. So I think they split it just into those two. It's not all of it, but I think you get something from the CPAC from, if memory says, I don't know if anyone else remembers it more, who's looked at the scoring thing a bit more recently.
I guess it is possible that when you're doing the data collection, you could. I know for some, like on the registry, you have split out some of the scores for some questionnaires, so you could split out acceptance into those two different subsets.
And also, it's just interesting how just because they score that is that's coming out as such a main theme, isn't it? Like it's just to know, like, well, if you were using as a predictor of who's likely to do well on a program and stuff, it's like, well, which bit of that is the key thing to then, or is it, you know what I mean? Like, what bit of that is predicting what? And maybe it's all of the above. So maybe it's all its component parts. So, but yeah, I'll stop. Thank you, Andrew, again.
Thank you.
We did stop collecting the Roland Morris. I say it was stopped before I started here at the Walton Centre, so I'm not quite sure why we stopped collecting it. But would you advise, Andrew, that measure would be good for us to maybe consider continuing with, given it's such a strong relationship with the other variables?
I think he did start using something else instead.
Yeah, the Tampa.
But I think you've got have you got like, it's like pain specific functional scale as well, something like that. Yeah. So I think that's more, I think we had to choose between Roland Morris and that one because they were so highly correlated. I think they both measure basically like physical disability or ability. But anyway, they were very highly correlated. So it might be the case that just going off the PSFS, I think it's called, scale, they might give you, it might be similar results from that because it's very highly correlated.
We're stopping using that as well.
Oh, really?
Moving back to the Cochrane.
Yeah,
so
well, the results are from the Roland Morris, so that's yeah. If you're interested in those results, then yeah, it is the Roland Morris that was using you.
It's quite a short questionnaire. It's not arduous, is it?
What, the Roland Morris?
It's only one page, isn't it? It's just, I think we were worried about the amount because it was just getting thicker and thicker every year.
It's the same situation now. I think one more questionnaire would send them over the edge with the amount of pack. Yeah, I think it would be more to replace than to add.
Fair enough.
I think, but there is growing interest in the positive psychology model, and obviously Helena's paper that I sent round a while ago, who was one of our deep insights, looking at factors that enable someone to thrive generally living with chronic pain. And our measures, apart from self-efficacy, focus on a negative theme and how much are we reducing that negative impact, and we don't measure a lot of what enables you to thrive or what enables you to do well on the programme apart from self-efficacy. And it was only hope, wasn't it, a construct of hope that you found, Andrew, in your systematic review that was a positive prognostic factor.
And again, like in the systematic reviews, these are probably the predictors that, like less robust too. So hope was very interesting, and like it was all positive, but there just wasn't enough information. So it would be, like we said, this definitely merits like further investigation, but we can't like strictly say hope is a good predictor yet. But all the signs are good.
And I wonder, just subjectively, as well as a patient completing something that's positively worded, and got a different theme, I wonder what that would feel like to complete at the end of a pain management program of, rather, how depressed are you now is how much better are you feeling now? And there aren't many measures. And Helena also, she wrote an article in Pain News recently all about this shift in pain management programs to include outcomes in that direction. And again, I don't think I could cope with finding more outcomes to add, but I think it might be about chopping and changing and replacing potentially. So yeah, any thoughts you have, Andrew, when you start pulling all these findings together? And I think you said there's talk of developing a whole new measure as well, isn't there? So yeah, we'd be really interested in your thoughts on that, and hopefully after you finish your PhD, this work can continue either with yourself or with other people, because you just laid the foundations of so many more questions and avenues we could go down that we haven't had before. So thank you. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, if you had some kind of PhD, like you said, like a few of you mentioned, like different ideas, and I'm sure people would be very interested to be contribute to that. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Right, we are bang on 2 o'clock. So has anyone else got anything, any last reflections or comments, questions before we finish up?
Well, thank you very much for listening. Very appreciate
Thank you so much,
appreciate
Andy.
your comments too.
Really, really eye-opening. So I think we'll all be thinking on this as a team for a long time. So thank you again, and good luck with the write-up, and enjoy your trip to Thailand, and we'll see you when you're back.
Yeah, so I'll share all my write-ups when as soon as I've got them. They'll be much more detailed.
Oh, lovely. No rush, no rush. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.